When I was a sophomore in high school, around this time of year, that had been, I guess 15 years ago or so, I know, that seems like a long time for me. It was like maybe 2005. I don't know how many years that has been. 20? Okay, there we go, 20 years. That seemed too far. I guess not. I had the aspiration of being the starting shortstop for our baseball team. Like I said, I was a sophomore. The problem was there was a guy above me who was a junior, and he also wanted to start. He had a better arm than me. I felt I was a better overall player. And so our coach knew that we both were potential starters for that position. And so we went into the season competing for that position. Now, like I said, I was a sophomore. It's not super common for sophomores to be able to play varsity, at least not at that time. There was a lot of players on the team that year. So there wasn't a good chance this could happen, but I had a fair chance. We started the season, and I did get some opportunity to play shortstop for the varsity team, but I was also playing JV because I pitched, and they were not going to have me pitch for varsity. I wasn't needed, and I needed to pitch to continue to get better. So I was doing both. Now, this all came to a head when we had a doubleheader on a Saturday. So the way they would do this at least 1 or 2 times a year. You would have a doubleheader where you would go somewhere on a Saturday morning and you play 2 games. And so I knew going into this doubleheader throughout the week, I was going to start at shortstop the second game for the varsity team. So this was sort of like my big chance. And so we go, and I didn't play that well this game. I don't remember much about it. I know that I maybe made an error, which happens. But basically, this was my big shot, and I did not show up and do anything spectacular. And what ended up happening was the coach didn't really say anything else the rest of the year. He didn't really go back and revisit like what was going on with me and the other guy. He didn't say, okay, well, we're going to go with this guy. Just kind of things went on. I continued to mostly pitch on JV and play for the JV team and then dress for varsity whenever I could. Now, that was basically what happened. And then the end of the season comes, and it's time for sectionals. I am on the team. I dress for sectionals. I'm on the roster. But the guy who beat me out wasn't playing very well. So the coach ended up taking him out and putting someone else in. Completely different from either of us. This guy had not at all been on anyone's radar as a potential for this position. So that happened, and I felt as if I was unjustly overlooked. I felt as if I wasn't given the opportunity, as if I could only see the problem with these other teammates and why I should be playing instead of them. I look back now and I realize, as a player, I did not give my coach a reason to play me over these other guys. I did not play exceptional. I wasn't hitting so well that he needed me in the lineup. I guarantee if I was hitting 500 or 600 in JV, that he'd have been like, okay, maybe we need to find a spot for this guy on the varsity team because he would have helped us. I wasn't doing that. I only could see the problems of my teammates. I couldn't see my own problems. Why is it that this is how life goes? We're so easy and so quick to point out other people's faults while we don't even notice our own. It's as if we don't even see that we have our own problems. There's one answer to this, and the answer to that question is sin. Sin is the reason that we don't notice our own problems. And Lent is a season all about sin, right? Lent is about looking at and focusing on our sin. And so there's one question that we need to focus on today. Why am I so quick to point out someone else's sin while ignoring my own? That's the question I want us all to think about today. Why do we so quickly point out other people's sins while we ignore our own? And to explore this question today, we're going to be looking at a story from the Gospel of Luke in chapter 15, verses 1 through 3, and then 11 through 32. If you want to follow along in the Pew Bible, it is on page number 1489. 1489, Luke chapter 15. It's 1 through 3, and then we skip down to verse 11. It'll also be up here on the screen. So let us take a look together at this story. Luke 15:1. This is how it starts. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Last week, we joined Jesus in a different spot in Luke, but just sort of in the middle of a story where there was no clear description of where he was or what he was doing other than he was teaching. The same for today. If you go back a chapter, it doesn't really say where Jesus is. We know that he's on his way to Jerusalem, and there's crowds that are following him and gathering. And so this is one of those instances where there's a crowd, and in this crowd is tax collectors and sinners, and they are listening to Jesus. And then there's also some Pharisees and there's teachers of the law who are also there, and they notice Jesus. And what's going on is that Jesus is talking to the wrong people. He's hanging out with the bad guys. I just said that I like baseball. I played baseball. I don't know if you knew that this week was the start of the Major League Baseball season. Most of you probably didn't know that. You don't care. That's okay. So I'm a Cincinnati Reds fan. Now the Reds have 4 teams in their conference. So if anything, I don't want those teams to do well so the Reds do well. But there's one team in particular that I don't want to do well, and that is the Chicago Cubs. So I'm sorry if you're a Cubs fan, but if you're a Cubs fan, you know that the Cubs and the Reds kind of have this, they're close and they've had lots of showdowns over the years. So basically what's going on right now is Jesus is hanging out with Cubs fans. And that's the problem. He's hanging out with Cubs fans, he should be hanging out with Reds fans. So the Pharisees say to Jesus, "You're hanging out with the bad kids." So in this story, we have the good guys who are supposed to be good, and that's the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. Then we have the bad guys, the tax collectors and the sinners. And Jesus is hanging out with the bad guys. So right here, what we see is the Pharisees are doing what I did to my teammates. They're looking at all the problems with Jesus and the tax collectors and the sinners, and they're ignoring their own problems. They're saying he should be with us because we're the good guys. Why is he with those bad guys? Why is he over there? He should be with us. This is what is going on. And so Jesus is going to respond. Verse 3. Then Jesus told them this parable. So this is Jesus' response. In typical Jesus fashion, he tells a parable. Actually, he tells 3 parables here. So if you go look at verses 4 through 10 this week, you'll see 2 short parables that we skip over. I didn't pick to skip them. The lectionary readings pick to skip them. You'll see that when we read this final parable, it's very long. There just isn't time to do all of them. But if you go look at the first 2 and then look at what we're going to look at today, I challenge you to try to see how they all go together. And there will be a little hint at the end that brings them together. But Jesus tells a parable. So let's see what parable he does say here in verse 11. So Jesus continued. So he told the first 2, then he tells the third. There's no break in between them. He does boom, boom, boom. So this is the third parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. So in this parable, when we study parables, we need to look at the characters and the details. You might already think you know this parable. It's a very popular one. But we meet 2 characters right up off the bat. We meet the father, and then we meet a younger son. And the younger son says, "Father, I want you to divide your estate and give me my inheritance early." And then we're told that the father does this. So this is how the story starts. There's a younger son who's asked for his early inheritance, and the father decides to honor his request. Now verse 13, this is what happens next. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. So now we learn what this younger son does with this inheritance. He goes to Vegas, and he blows all of his money at Vegas, doing all of the things you can do there. And then this happens. Verse 14, down here. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So he squanders everything. He's broke. He needs to get a job. So he gets a job. It's not even clear it's really a job. It might be this case where he owes debt to this person, and so he's working off his debt. So he's actually not getting a paycheck. He's basically just working. And that might be why he doesn't have any food, because that person who he's working for would be responsible to feed him, and that's why he's so hungry, because that guy is apparently not a very good person, is not even giving him what he needs. So this son is broke, he's hungry, he's at the bottom. And then he has a realization, verse 17. Then he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father." So he comes to his senses and realizes, even my father's servants, so the people doing in my father's house what I am doing in this man's house, live better than me. Why don't I go home, tell my father I've been foolish, and just ask, can I be a servant in your house? Because at least then I will have food, and I'll be taken care of. So the son doesn't even want to be reinstated to his position in his father's family. He just wants a chance to work and eat. So he goes home, and this is what happens. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. So his father is waiting by the phone. We don't wait by the phone anymore, right? You can just take your phone with you. You can get it out and check those notifications all the time. His father is constantly looking for that missed call, that text, something from the son. And then he sees him coming home. The father has been waiting for his son to return. And so this is how the reunion goes. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against you, against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." So he goes to his father and he tells him what he had planned to tell him, to confess that he has been foolish, but to not ask for his place as son, but just to ask to be a servant. But the son or the father is not going to have any of that. This is what the father says. But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. So the father is not going to have any of his son's requests to be a servant. Instead, the father gives him his old clothes back, a symbol of being a member of his family. He gives him the family ring back, a symbol of him being a son. And he throws a party to welcome the son back. Now, normally this is where we hear this parable end. The son who was lost, who was wayward, who was foolish, realizes that he needs to come back, and his father is willing to receive him. And what we hear in that story is the story that God is willing to receive you no matter what you've done or who you've been. He's ready to welcome you back. And that is absolutely part of the message of this parable. But there's another character in this story that often gets overlooked. So let's keep going with verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. So now we meet the second son, the older son. This son was out working. He comes home. He sees there's a party. He's like, "I didn't know there was a party. What's going on?" So he asks a servant, and this is what the servant tells him. "Your brother has come home," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." So he learns that his wayward brother, the brother who left the family in shambles, took his father's money and left, probably leaving a wake of hurt and heartache and pain behind that the older brother saw. Now his brother's home. And to his horror, his father is throwing a party to celebrate the return of his brother. So now this is when we need to start paying attention to the story. If you were the son, how would you react? The older brother. How would you feel right now? If one of your siblings had gone, left the family in pain, and then comes back, and you know your parents receive them with open arms. Let's see how the son responds. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' The older brother is rightfully angry. He doesn't understand how his father could receive his brother with open arms. So this is how his father responds. 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" Now here's what we miss by not reading the first two parables. There are two parables about lost things being found. And in both of those parables, one thing is lost. It's a sheep and it's some coins. But the owner, the shepherd, and the woman looking for those coins looks everywhere to find those lost things because they're so important to find. And when they're found, they celebrate. And now we have a story of a lost son, a lost brother who comes back, and the father is going to celebrate his return. In this story, there are two types of people. There is the younger son and there's the older son. Remember, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and religious leaders who are critical of him for talking to the bad guys. So in this story, who's the bad guys? Obviously, it's the younger son who's gone away. But now the Pharisees see Jesus hanging out with the bad guys because the bad guys want to come back to God. I would even say that they would maybe want to come back, but the Pharisees are already saying you can't come back. If you've seen The Chosen, you saw how people treated Matthew, who was a tax collector. His own family would not talk to him. His own parents had disowned him. Even if he wanted to come home, they would not open the door for him. So even if he wanted to come back, there was no opportunity. And Jesus knows that, and he says to the Pharisees, "Are you like the older brother who doesn't even want to see the younger son received and welcomed?" So for us, at one point, we were like the son, the younger son. We were somewhere wayward. Maybe it was a lifetime growing up. We come to Jesus. But now maybe we're on this side with the older brother. And we see the people on the other side. So the question we need to ask is, how do we look at those people? Because if there's one thing we see from this story, we see that it's never too late to be saved. All people find themselves in some state of sin, and it's never too late to be saved. So if we're on this side with the older brother, how do we look at the people who are still in sin? Do we look at them as the bad guys? Do we have people we don't want to see come to Jesus because we know they're bad people? Or do we want to be like the Father? And do we want to follow the example of Jesus and reach across the aisle to welcome those people? It's never too late to be saved. Even for people who don't believe they deserve to be saved. So if that is you, if you're like, I don't feel like I can be saved, I've done so many horrible things. The younger son realized his mistake. And he wasn't wanting to become a son again, but the father forgave him. All of us have been given something we didn't deserve, but it's been offered to us. It's never too late to be saved. But we can find ourselves on the other side. And when we are on the other side, are we going to protest or are we going to welcome the people who come? Paul sums this up so well in 2 Corinthians. Look what he says here at first. Just a couple of these verses we read earlier. All this is from God who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. So first, Paul says, look, God is out there saving people. He's bringing people back. He's opening his arms to people. It's never too late to be saved. And Paul says, when you become one of those people who says yes to Jesus, that means you take on his mission. And taking on his mission means that you become one of those people who wants to see other people saved. Other people reconnected to God. And this is what Paul knew. he had a disagreement with the Corinthians, and they had come back together. And there's probably still some people in the city of Corinth, where this letter's written, who want nothing to do with Paul. And Paul's reminding them that God is a God of bringing people back together. Our God is a God of harmony. He wants to bring harmony to people, to the world, to relationships. And he invites his followers to join in that work. So we need to see it's never too late to be saved. It's never too late to welcome someone back in. Lent is a season about sin, but it's also a season when we realize it's never too late to be saved. Holy Week is coming, and we get to be on the recipient end of God's gift of grace and love. But when we say yes to Jesus, we're saying yes to welcoming people who return. And look what Paul also says to wrap this. He says in verse 20, he says, "We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though Christ were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God." So not only does Paul say that we didn't be friendly towards people who are on the outside, but we should actually be advocating on God's behalf to those people. So imagine the parable this way. The older brother sees his younger brother and the pain that's caused his family. And he goes to get his brother and find him and bring him home. That's what we're invited to do. It's never too late to be saved. And we're supposed to be the people doing that work with Jesus. Our job isn't to pick who gets to invited to the party. We can't be like the Pharisees, like I was with my teammates, only looking at the faults of my other teammates and never looking at my own problems and realizing that if they play well, we're a better team. Instead, I was only upset that I didn't get the opportunity I needed. Our job is to see people as God sees them and to wait for them to come home and to go get them. So as we draw near to Holy Week, may we come to see ourselves and to see others in the way that God sees them, as people who are lost but who are loved, who need to be found. And may we realize it's never too late to be saved. And if we're on the outside looking in, if you're on the outside, know that you can come in. And if you're on the inside, I encourage you to see people as God sees them and to reach out your arm and to try to welcome them back in. It's never too late to be saved.